Welcome to the Executorium Podcast. I'm your host, Bill Gross, at Bill Gross Probate on social media. We get together every week with new experts and vendors to help executors through the process of dealing with the estates that they're responsible for, trust, probate, whatever type of estate that they're dealing with. Normally we have a vendor we deal with, and today I'm really lucky to have Reverend Kaleel Sakakeeny, who deals with animal grief, and we're going to talk a little bit about what that means. It's a little more expensive than you'd first meet. Reverend Kaleel Sakakeeny, welcome to our podcast.
Thanks, Bill. Pleasure to be here. Thanks for asking me.
So first off, I think, what is animal grief? What's the process that people need help in this area for?
Yeah, I think we've underestimated the power of the animal and human connection. We've found over the last several years that this relationship has changed. Usually put the dog in the backyard, and the dog house put the cat outside, and the dog came into the house, the cat came into the house, then it came into the bed, and they became part of the family. In fact, there's a recent study by the ASPCA, I think it was, that said that people, when describing their family circle, giving a graphic sense of who the family was, more often than not, they put the pet at the center of the family circle. More than the Rolls Royce or the Hyundai or more than the jewelry or whatever, the pet was at the center of the family. And that meant that there was an intense emotional reaction and connection with the animal and the human. It became part of the family. And when that dissolved, when that pet dies, there's a profound sense of grief, a loss of normalcy, the end of a kind of memory train and relationship. And it rears its head in the settlement of estates, to go back to your point, because the animal occupies a kind of midway point. The law considers it property, like a toaster or a car or whatever, but it's not. It's a fundamental emotional or spiritual part of the family. So whether the pet dies and there's this profound loss, which triggers all other kinds of losses, or the settling an estate, it becomes a bone of contention, which people underestimated or never even thought of.
Yeah, well, the never even thought of part is one aspect we'll talk about in just a second. But the underestimated, I'll admit that to be guilty of that. My wife and I, my wife and daughter got a dog about 13 years ago, and unfortunately it passed just about a year ago.
Oh.
And I'm not a dog person. I only did it to be a good husband and a good father. I had no, I had responsibilities. I didn't really want. But I have to say, I was surprised, and I had no idea about the deep emotional impact that its passing had, in particular, on my wife and my daughter, but on my wife. I don't want to say it was like a member of the family, but it's the closest next thing. And so emotionally, there's a lot to deal with, I imagine.
It is a member of the family, and you'd be surprised. What gets triggered is that I'll deal with someone who's lost a pet, and before you know it, they'll say, well, I grieved more for the pet than did when my mother passed.
Yeah.
Well, why is that? Because our relationship with humans, it's complex. The person that passed, we may have had arguments with, there may have been betrayals, denials, criticism, judgments. That doesn't happen between a person and a pet. There's no criticism, there's no judgment. So that is a pure kind of love, and maybe the only pure kind of love we've ever met. And when that dies, our hearts are broken. And the weird part is, most people turn to a therapist because the grief is so profound, but the therapist just wants to fix you. But there's nothing to fix. Nothing's broken. And there's no pill for a broken heart. And that's where we come in.
The other difference I think is with humans, like when my mother passed, I called her at least once a week, and I saw her every 2-3 weeks. We had a good relationship, but I only saw her, every 2-3 weeks. I only talked to her once a week.
Right.
The dog, every time I walk in the kitchen, the dog was there, every single day, 3, 4, 5 times a day, and interaction with the dog. And so the trigger, and again, I'd have even an emotional relationship with the dog, but the trigger is more regular, right? Whereas a parent, you might not think about once a month or two until something comes up. But with a pet in your house, you're triggered all the time. The dog, you find a dog toy, you find that the dog scratched something, it's going to be a constant trigger. So imagine that you really need to work through that grief, or else it's going to work through you, I think, is how grief works.
Exactly right. It is exactly right. I mean, if people feel ashamed, sometimes they'll say, how long should I grieve? Or it's only, people will say it's only a cat or only a dog, but then they're disenfranchising your grief. Right. People just now, starting to get that the loss of a pet is equal to the loss of a human being
Yeah.
for many of us in terms of its emotional impact, and the path it takes us down in terms of feeling bereft, lost, confused. The old order has changed, and we've lost a companion. We've lost an animal companion in our lives, a companion.
I think the thing you hit on that I appreciate is that you have to kind of accept what is real, right? When people are in pain, whether it's appropriate or not by our judgment is irrelevant. The fact they're in pain, and that pain has to be dealt with. I always feel like it's like a infection on your skin. You got to get the pus out or the bad stuff out of the skin, and that's the pain, that's the emotion, that's the grief. And you can deny it being there, but it's still there.
That's
and I'm religious too. We have a very structured process for our grief that forces us to at least address it at a very deep level. I know that before I was religious, my father passed, I'd go through that process, and I don't know that I ever properly fully grieved. And when my mother passed, I followed that procedure much more precisely. And as a result, at least had the opportunity to deal with it. So talk a little bit. People don't want to spend the time on grieving. They want to kind of rush the process. They want to move on with their lives. But really, you can't move on if that poison's really in your emotional being, right?
Well, we always say, let's not talk about moving on. Let's talk about moving forward. And you can only move forward when you heal. And grief is a non-judgment zone. And until recently, as I said, pet grief hasn't been considered a legitimate or authentic kind of grief. But yes, grief needs to unravel, and it unravels in its own time. There's no timetable for it. Right. So it really, you are on a grief journey. And that's where therapy, as I said before, mental health treatment kind of breaks down, because they want to return you to normal, get you ready, get you back to where you were so you can be a productive member of society. But we are a grief illiterate society, and there's no normal to return to. It's gone. So the grief, you have to build a whole new reality.
It seems to me also the changes just in my lifetime that whereas families were more together, the elders closer to the children geographically, physically, now we've seemed to have distributed so that older people are more on their own, more lonely, and more their only companionship, or a little small part of companionship, are their pets. I know the story just hit recently about Gene Hackman and how he had dogs in the house, right? He had no human visited them for a week.
Right.
I mean, think about what that's saying about a guy who was one of the most famous actors in my lifetime. Not one human came to his door for a week, yet they had pets in the house. And that tells you, I think, the central role of pets in many people's emotional being, which is the pets might be the only people they interact with on a regular basis, or the only things they interact with on a regular basis.
Yeah, and they also are central to their lives. They give them meaning. They give their lives meaning. And when that pet is gone, well, again, back to the idea of what also hurts is the divorce situation when that occurs, which is another kind of death and another kind of grief, because the animal has an emotional connection to us and us to them, but the law considers the animal just property, like a toaster or like a car. And so when the time comes for a couple to split or the estate to be dissolved, nobody knows what to do, because there's a conflict between the legal interpretation and the emotional reality. Although some countries, like New Zealand, are flirting with the idea of creating a personhood for the animal, that its feelings need to be considered, and the feelings of a husband or wife or a partner, whatever the case may be, have to be considered. And that's really central. And that comes up. I've worked with so many people for whom that's a major issue.
One of the things that has been overlooked, and some of the estate planning attorneys I work with make a point of catching, is the handling of pets in an estate plan, right? It's one thing to take care of a pet, it's another thing to take care of it when you're not around. Talk a little bit about what you've seen that have been best practices for people who've been able to know that their pets are taken care of past their lifetime.
Well, a lot of people work their pets into their wills, and we've done that too. And we have made an addendum to our will stating that there are a couple of people with whom our dog gets along beautifully. And we've asked to set aside financially and we've included that set aside for this particular person in the event that we pass together or whatever. The dog will be taken care of, and that's critical because they are a living being and have been a very important part of your life. And to take a dog to a shelter after having lived with you for 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years, that is a profound pain and a terrible betrayal. So we need to think in terms of the humanness or the spiritual nature of the animal-human connection and act accordingly. But unfortunately, it's like, who bought the dog, whose name is on the receipt, that's the person who gets the dog in terms of a conflict.
Right. I'm not really a dog person at all, but if I was an executor in an estate, for a parent or somebody, and they had an animal to deal with, I wouldn't take it to my house. I don't think, wouldn't want to. On the other hand, I wouldn't want to have to take it to the pound knowing what's going to happen with it. It really is a very difficult situation that should be addressed. And I think is often, people don't understand how easy it is to address that by adding it to the will at the time. Another question that pops out, obviously, when I deal with you is your title is Reverend. Explain a little bit about your background and then how that plays into your work.
Yeah, when I lost an animal, I was really plunged into very deep despair, and I had no place to turn because every time I turned, people weren't able to grasp the depth of the pain and the loss because, as I said, we are a grief-illiterate society, and the idea of a dog or a cat having that much, or a bunny or a bird or a horse having that much effect on our emotions was still strange. So I looked around for some help, and I couldn't find it, only to find a theological institute, one of the two in the country maybe, that offered a program in animal chaplaincy. And you took that program and you studied for a long time, and endowed you with or introduced you to spiritual relationships between you and the animal. And you committed yourself, therefore, to serving animals and people in distress. Other animal chaplains work in shelters. I happen to work with people who have lost their pets. And then I became an ordained minister, ordained pastor, because what I saw was people seeking spiritual counseling, pastoral counseling, in addition to working with the loss of the animal and that kind of grief. So it enables me to talk in spiritual language without having to talk in religious language. So we can talk about that.
And it seems to me like once you get the person open up a little bit, perhaps about the pet, they can open up more about the other aspects of the grief or the spiritual challenges they're facing. So it seems to me like you're using this as, I want to say a stepping stone. That sounds manipulative, but maybe as an opening, as an opener, as an hors d'oeuvre to get them to start the process. Because I know people resist grieving, but having been through that myself, it's so important to go through.
It takes seconds, just literally seconds, to talk to a person who comes to me to talk about the death of their bunny or their bird or whatever. And within seconds, they're saying things like, well, my mom died, or my dad died, or my brother.
Yeah.
And it's just a connection. Yeah. It's like, whoa. And you're absolutely right. The death of a pet is a portal, a way into unresolved losses of the past, which, if not resolved, we carry forward and affect us emotionally, self-confidence-wise. We have no idea, because all trauma has grief inside of it. Yeah. And many people who are traumatized have this profound grief. And many people who are lost a friend, lost a marriage, lost a job, are grieving. And we're grieving now. So the whole COVID thing was a study in gigantic grief, which is when my phone never stopped ringing.
My best friend passed when I was in college, 1978. So that's going to be 47 years ago. He passed. And last night, my wife was watching a movie, Ordinary People, that to this day triggers me because of the death of this brother who was like my brother when he passed in high school. That physically, I feel it just in talking to you. I feel, because I never really had a chance to grieve. I didn't know, I had no process. I had no community at that stage in my life. I was separate from my family. All I did was drink. I didn't know what else to do. Yeah. And so that's just way to stuff in the pain that for the rest of my life has been coming out a little at a time. And so these are things that are really important. I want to just acknowledge, if you're having pain, if you have unresolved issues regarding somebody who passed, it's something worth pursuing to discuss, to explore, to talk to somebody who's experienced in these areas. I'm not experienced to help other people, but I am experienced to point them in the right direction. And Reverend Sakakeeny, I appreciate you taking time today.
My pleasure.
We want to, for anybody who's interested in getting in touch with him, specifically Animal Talks, and here's his email, Kaleel@animaltalksinc.com. His phone number, as well as the website, is animaltalksinc.com. So if you're interested in getting more information, that is the best place to do that. And then just, I want to, for those who are watching, again, reminder that this is the Executorium podcast, and this is a website that's designed for executors of estates as well as vendors who serve them. We continue the conversation on our Facebook group. If you have questions or referrals, you can go there as well. Executorium is Executorium, and it's a website designed for executors. It has 4 basic tiles of resources. It has a directory of providers. It has a directory of government resources where you get forms and such, as well as 2 good tiles on articles and learning information. If you go to the directory of estate service and hit browse, it'll ask you to prompt your county. If you put in Suffolk County, Massachusetts, what will pop up will be under, I lost my spot there. Where was it? Grief support, grief, loss, and help counseling, which is our guest today. It has their contact information. But what you can know is these are people who are committed to helping executors like you deal with the process of an estate, whether it be the physical property, the financial property, the legal property, or in this case, the emotional baggage, emotional issues that come along with that as well. So again, Reverend Sakakeeny, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate your time. Look forward to seeing you soon. Again,
Thank you very much.
My pleasure. And for the rest of you, again, this is the Executorium podcast. We get together every week with more content. If you like it, please like it, subscribe, or put comments. If I can help in any way, please reach out at Bill Gross Probate. As always, make today your best day ever. Thanks so much.
That's it.